Good. All right. Well, man, this has probably been the one I've looked most forward to. As some of you have heard, LifePoint, the #1 viewed sermon series for LifePoint was our anxiety series from a year and a half ago. It was when I was just coming on board. And in the midst of that, I got to meet these two lovely ladies. And they, at the end of that series, did a one-day event for people in which they unpacked anxiety for people on that day. So I knew that when we got to this topic of anxiety, I was going to get to talk to Rachel and Laura again about anxiety. So they did such an amazing job, and I'm looking forward today and what they were able to bring and just help people through that. Obviously, as Chris talked about this morning, this is a big topic, not something you unpack in a sermon. It's not something we can entirely unpack this evening as we talk through this, but certainly we can help identify for people. When do I go get help? When is it more of a spiritual matter or more? And so I'll let the professionals talk about that. But for those of you that don't know me, I'm Bob. I'm the life group and care pastor, and I am with Rachel Yount and Laura Layton, two of my favorite people in the world, and we're going to get to talk to you a little bit about anxiety. So, and it's been one of those days, right, guys? I mean, we could all come to the table and go, man, this has been a day filled with anxiety, and yet here we are. We got here. We're actually about later than we wanted to be because we didn't have all the tools we needed. So we could have been a little anxious about that, but we pulled it together and here we are.
Amen.
Thanks for being on with me tonight, you guys. Thanks for working it out. So
yeah.
Thank you. It's our privilege.
It is. As you said, we both had crazy days. We were going to be at church, trying to help if anybody wanted to talk about anxiety after church.
We were.
And instead, each of us in our own different ways wound up in the emergency and urgent care with family members.
We did.
And so it was a day that could have been anxiety ridden.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the fact is, there's just a lot of life that we don't have control over. Jesus told us that, right? That we would have trials, that we would have things come up in our life. And so we should just expect that. And not in a way that makes us worry about when is the other shoe going to drop, but just in a way that we have that we're grounded enough to know that we can get through it. We've gotten through it before. We'll get through it again.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Just glad you guys made it today and glad everybody's okay. To the extent they can be okay. So
everyone is okay. Yeah. That's usually the end of the story, right?
Well, very cool. So who wants to dive in? Who's going to dive in for us and kick us off on the subject of anxiety? You both deal with it.
So we were laughing when we came in because we were saying how we had just done this whole thing on anxiety a year and a half ago and had, slides and notes and all kinds of things. And we show up today with nothing. But it's something that we're both extremely familiar with. As counselors, anxiety is something that comes up more than anything else.
Oh, yeah.
It's the real epidemic, that we're facing now. I love to tie in scripture when I'm working with anything, but anxiety is particularly good for that because there's so much scripture that tells us not to fear, not to be anxious, and it's a place where you can read that, but sometimes it's hard to tell your mind to believe that, right? So I love that the Greek word in the Bible for anxiety is merimneo, and it basically means being torn apart, being pulled in two different directions, or many different directions. And if you think about the culture that we live in, and I think, Chris talked a little today about there's so many things pulling at us that it takes a real effort to not be anxious. Yes.
Yeah. How about that? Yeah. One of the passages you were talking about scripture, one of the passages for me was at 1 Peter 5. I think it's verse 7 in there where it says, cast your anxiety on him because he loves you. And for me, that went further than just saying be anxious for nothing. It actually gave me something to do. If I cast my anxiety on God, that in fact He's going to care for me. And that became a big deal for me in the couple of years where I found myself unemployed, and you're wondering, how are you going to pay the bills, those kind of things. And yet it seemed God was so obedient to that idea of giving my anxieties over to Him. Now, it didn't always come in the form of a paycheck, but it was that word of encouragement, or somebody calling me, somebody that just really helped me and helped carry me through those anxious times. So yeah, that's great.
He is faithful even when we are not, right?
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah.
Well, and Laura was saying, I mean, we live in this super anxiety-ridden culture. And I would say anxiety across the board. Anxiety is not new. It's existed, since the beginning of time. And truly, we talked about when we did our thing a year and a half ago, that anxiety is sort of this subsidiary of stress. And stress, our bodies were created to experience stress. So when we think of stress, it's something that's happening back here in the brain. It kind of takes us offline from being able to think clearly. But when we have anxiety, we're just reacting, right? And I think Chris talked about slowing down. That's a great way to address anxiety. But it happens back here in the brain, and it's this response. Our entire body goes into respond. And it's really to keep us safe. And I always talk with clients about, if there is a tiger chasing you, it is great that your body was pre-programmed by its creator with the ability to get out of there. That's exactly what needs to happen. You got to get out of there when there's a real danger. But the problem with anxiety, and when it becomes kind of this clinical diagnosis anxiety, which a lot of people could at some point in their lives, or at all points in their lives, grab an anxiety disorder diagnosis. Absolutely. But what happens is, stress is meant to be short term. The tiger comes into the woods, you're there, you address the situation, you hopefully survive, and then that's the end of the stressful situation. You go to your cave or wherever it is that you live, and you're okay now. And you know that you're okay now, and everything's okay now. It was meant to be short term. And so anxiety is when that stress becomes long term. And we deal with it a ton. I would say a huge majority of my clients come in with anxiety being at least one of the things that they're dealing with. Yes.
I think I have to use this talk as a time to talk about how much these are killing us. If you think about, like Rachel mentioned, the tiger coming after you, you can all day long find things that are, threatening to you or your family or your society or your school or your neighborhood or your country or another country or the world or the rainforests or the refugees or there's always going to be something that you could be worried about. And that's not to say we shouldn't care about those things or even be aware, but if we don't limit the amount that we look at this, we are doing nothing but creating circuitry in our brains that is just completely fear focused.
I
always say that
I love what you guys just said there, because it's not the lion, it's not the lion that's in front of us. It's the lion that's here and happening all around the world. It doesn't even have to be in front of us. It could be happening across the continent, but because we're plugged in, or we get anxious about those things. So
we were never intended to know all of the bad things happening all the time in the world, because our brain is geared to say, then what? So what do we do? And if there is something bad happening, earlier this morning, I was at urgent care with my son. He has a scratched eyeball. He's going to be okay. His vision will not be impaired, but I needed to deal with that. That was a stressor, but there was something that I could do to deal with it, because it was my stressor. It was something that was in my realm of influence. And what happens with anxiety is we start to stress about things that are not within our realm of influence. We think we just need to figure it all out. And in fact, I would say Chris kind of tackled social media. And I would say, yes, do not respond to a social media post. Do not address whatever it is on social media. We think we need to figure out all the problems of the world. We think that we've suddenly become experts on everything, and we just need to address it all and make sure that we know it all and address it all, and we tell other people about it all. In fact, people often come to counseling with anxiety, and me included. I have struggled with anxiety. I mean, I think a lot of people have struggled with anxiety, but people come wanting to figure it out. They're like, hey, I just need for you to powwow with me for however long. We just need to figure this out, and then I'll be able to leave counseling. That's always the plan. But the reality is that when people leave counseling having sort of healed from their anxiety or have tools for their anxiety, usually it's because they've recognized they're not going to be able to figure it out. They've just accepted that nobody can figure it out, that actually that's the wrong question to be asking. We can't figure it out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And again, like Jesus said, we will have trials. You will always have the poor among you. The earth is groaning. I mean, like these are things that not that we shouldn't care, but social media sometimes gives us a false sense of we're doing something, and it's kind of like a trick that keeps us captivated to, well, let me do something, let me learn more, let me and again, within limits, that's okay. But I think we all know, I honestly think I can speak for every American. That is so bold, but I really think like we all know that these are not helping us. We would far prefer to Google something than to go to the Lord about it. And that's mistake
Tweet
number
that
one. Right? Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I mean, they become such idols that we shouldn't be surprised that they're, causing us so much pain, really pain.
Yeah. I love how Chris talked about Sabbath, and he talked about fasting, and he said sometimes it needs to be a permanent fast. And the reality is that sometimes something that we're engaging in or something that's creating a stressor or triggering that stress response for us needs to be a permanent fast. And there are times when we need to get away from that situation and really just spend some time with God until we can not be almost addicted to it and addicted to that anxious cycle that it creates.
Yeah. So I just have a little question on that. And again, I may be way off base, but something I deal with when I'm talking with couples is a lot of times, and gals I see more often than not really struggle in this area of anxiety. And so the way I try to explain that to a husband is, for women, God actually wired women to think about a lot of things all at the same time. That in fact, I always describe it like a laptop. They have a laptop going in their brain with all the files running all the time. So they're thinking about how to care for the kids, how to get that grocery list done, how to get the house clean, and I got to take care of my husband, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. And that, in fact, for many women who, they end up with this sense of anxiety because they don't think that they're supposed to think about all those things at the same time, when in fact God wired them kind of intentionally in some ways for that. And in fact, I know for most women, they'd love to be able to shut those off, but it's part of the hardwiring, in the same way that for a guy, we're so laser focused on one thing at a time that it's hard for us sometimes to even engage on multiple levels with our spouse. And it causes differences in marriages where I go, no, that's her wiring. And don't tell her don't be anxious, or don't tell her don't think about those things. It's part of the hardwiring, and it's okay. Now it can turn into problems, right? It can turn into, the lion's long gone, but now I'm still worrying about that same thing over and over again, or that file hasn't shut down or whatever. But am I way off on that, or?
I think when you think about like all these things that sometimes women are stressing or anxious about, I would say even in Christian culture, I remember growing up, and it's like you cared if you were worried about people. Oh, I've been really worrying about you and praying for you. I love you. And those things don't have to go together. You can be thinking about somebody, you can be thinking about something and not be worried about it and anxiously turning it over. I think where the worry anxiety part comes is when I need to figure it out. It's all on my shoulders. And I think God may have created men and women, and obviously, some men are different than, lots of men struggle with anxiety too, but God may have created us to kind of have these certain ways that our brains work. I always call it waffle brain and spaghetti brain. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, so that'd be that same.
Yeah, it's like men kind of have like a divot and they can stay in that one spot a little bit easier than women. But I think it's when men or women start to feel like, but whatever it is that I need to get done, it needs to rest all on my shoulders. It's one thing to say, okay, I have work to think about. I want to make sure my kids are having what they need, what's for dinner. It's okay to be kind of turning those things over and trying to have a plan, but that's very different than I got to figure it out right now and I got to hurry and I got to do it and I'm going to fail. And it's that feeling of intense stress around whatever it is that I think separates it. What do you think, Laura?
And I think that sense and it goes with this sense of I have to have a plan for every contingency that could happen too.
Yes.
Right. So
yeah.
It's really a control thing, right? Like I need to know how I can handle this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And what if this happens? And what if this happens? And we talked about like, playing that out a little bit with the client sometimes is like, so play out. What if that does happen? Go to worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I think if you really look at the way that God works, he provides grace for you when you need it. And so he's not giving you the grace right now for the horrible thing that might happen, down the road, but you can trust that he will give it to you when you need it.
Yeah.
And so I think that by trying to think, well, I wouldn't be able to handle, if something happened to my son. Well, the fact is, I would be able to handle it because that's where God would meet me. I always think of Stephen being stoned to death and having the grace to be able to look up and see Jesus at the right hand of God, standing up like, you got this, Stephen. And think in that moment, the presence of God was so strong for him that he was literally being stoned to death and was able to ask God to forgive them.
Yeah, face of an angel.
And look like an angel, and so I think we worry about things ahead of time because we don't feel like we could handle it now unless we have all the, plan. And that definitely, I think women are a little more inclined towards that because of the way our brains are, our connectivity in our brains is wired up a little bit differently. But like you said, I think men also handle it a little different. It's not that it's
they handle
it there. It's just sort of like what lies beneath is sort of under the surface. So it might not look like, I need to talk about this and what about this? It might look more like I need another beer.
Yeah. Well, I think our egos get in the way. And the truth is, if guys would, whether it's seek counsel or even just the counsel of their wives, would often get the benefit of that if they'd be willing to open up. But, for a guy, it's our egos that sometimes get in the way, I think, sometimes too.
For all of us, not just guys.
What's that?
I think Chris talked a little bit about expectations.
Yeah.
And how we kind of, we have all these expectations on us, and we do have expectations on us, but I think we have, I'm going to do something. I'll be right back. I have an idea.
Oh, okay. Well, this is live recording.
Hey, what am I doing? Okay. So these are expectations. So I have a bunch of expectations here, and I'm just going to give them to Laura. I'm society. And society has all sorts of expectations of you, the things that you're supposed to have figured out, the things you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be an amazing worker. You're supposed to get whatever education you need to do the next thing, the best thing, get more education, do more. You're supposed to throw a Pinterest perfect birthday party for your kid. You're supposed to have retirement completely figured out, financially set. You definitely want to make sure you're in fashion with your furniture, with your clothes. There's expectations. And there's so much stress that we have around expectations. Maybe it's the expectations from your spouse or your kids. And expectations are like this. I can say, Laura, here you go. Can you take these expectations? Thank you. I just need for you to, yes, this is society trying to give you more. And as long as you just keep taking it, as long as you keep taking it, I can't take it anymore. And the reality is, in life, Laura and I have way too much fun together every time we get together. But the reality is, if I am society or your, spouse or your mother-in-law or whoever, if I'm trying, the phone, the world, trying to give you the expectation of what you're trying to do, this is the choice you have. I can say, hey, Laura, take it. It can be the enemy talking, right? Take it.
It's beautiful, but I just don't have room on my plate for it right
now. But
you
want to do this thing.
Oh, I really do want to do that, but I just don't have room on my plate right now.
all the people who really have it together are doing it though, Laura.
I know, but I live to please God first, and it would take away from my ability to do that.
Oh, you brought God into it. I gotta go with my expectations.
Wow,
Well,
I like that.
Segued into
Yeah.
one of the things that I like to ask people is to know, who are you?
Mhm.
How do you answer
Yeah.
that question? Who are you?
Um,
And then the second part being, who are you trying to please?
uh,
Because if you don't know who you're living to please, you're going to try to either please everyone or somebody that you
Love
probably will never be able to perfectly please. But if you're living to please God, then that just takes some trust and some accepting that he loves you with your imperfections, and that you need some time and some space for him. And so you're able to say no to a lot of the things that the world shoves at you.
yeah.
I get a
That
lot
is
of flack
beautiful.
from people for not being on social media. And I just know that I can't. I know that I'm already with this more than I want to be. And that if I were on social media, I wouldn't have time for the things that are really important in my life.
Yeah.
Because this thing is tricky, it just slowly takes more and more of your time. And I can easily get sucked into, researching something or something on YouTube. And hours can go by.
Yeah.
And then I can feel the anxiety when that, because I know that that's time that I didn't spend with my family, that I didn't spend, exercising or taking care of myself. It's time that I didn't spend with God. It's time that I didn't spend in community with people that I care about. And so I think when you can line up what you really value with the way you're spending your time, is when you have less anxiety. And a lot of times we don't do that. The things that we say we value actually don't get the most of our time.
Preach it. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, and that's that being pulled in different directions, right? I say I value this, but I'm living like this. And that's going to cause anxiety.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love what you guys just been talking about. I mean, you're talking about priorities, setting those priorities. Who are you and who are you, doing things for, those guys. That is so beautiful and so perfect. Yeah, and yet we get that so wrong. I think Andy Stanley said it this way. He says, if we all had social blinders on and we couldn't see what other people have, we in fact would want for a lot less. But part of our problem is we see what everybody else has, and society, media, everything else convinces us we need that, or why don't we have that, or whatever. And then social media, how come they're on vacation every week and I've had to work for the last, all those things that contribute to that. Wow, that is so good. Great.
And that kind of speaks to what Chris was talking about too, where, I mean, if we're always trying to impress people, then Chris talked about self-care, and I love how he called it Sabbath. I love that, because yes, I mean, I think if we're always trying to impress others and we're looking outward and we're trying to figure out our worth and our identity truly, which that can sometimes be at the core of anxiety. I always tell people I'm a go deep counselor. We can grab some tools for our tool belt, but I really want to go underneath the surface and go deep into, where did that come from? And a lot of times it's families of origin, or a belief about ourselves or our situation that made sense in the past, but it doesn't make sense anymore. And I think Chris was talking about self-care, and I mean, that goes really deep. I think we think about self-care as like bubble baths and chocolate on Fridays, but the reality is self-care is really, what am I going to do to care for the body and the life that God has given me? However many days I have here on earth, if it's, 17 days or 17 years or 70 years, however long I have here on earth, what am I going to do with that? And if I really have that as sort of my priority, then self-care becomes non-negotiable, and not a keeping up with the Joneses. Like, self-care looks like me going to the spa that you go to, or me having the vehicle that is not self-care. That is like the world's distortion of self-care. Self-care is, this is my body. This is what God's given me. These are the people in my life God's given me. How do I care for me? And that looks like, I mean, there's a million ways we could go with that, but rest.
A million ways, rest. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of this spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, and that you have to be purposeful about those things. And we're so busy and distracted all the time that we tend to not be purposeful about those things. And the fact is, if you're not being purposeful about eating well, getting some exercise, getting some fresh air, setting aside, having boundaries around your time and the people that you're with, then you're just going to be on this treadmill that doesn't allow for the rest. I gave a talk when I lived in Atlanta to a group of teenagers at a Christian school. And part of the talk was talking about learning how to be still so that you could hear from God. And I had a girl come up to me after that, and this was 8 years ago. So anyway, it was a while ago. She came up to me afterwards, and her legitimate question was, "What do you mean by be still?"
Yeah.
You guys, my heart broke, because I'm like, oh my gosh, for people that have grown up with, and again, I'm going to just bring it back to this, because I think that it's that constant
inundation,
constant mind, just being stimulated and overstimulated. And they really, unless someone has taught them, honestly don't know how to be still with their own thoughts, with being able to have a spiritual health. And emotional, mental, emphasis. They all go together. You can't separate them, really.
Well, and I like what you said about technology is a stimulant. It's stimulating us. So technology, we know it's stimulating us in the brain because of the lights. When we talked a little bit about media in another presentation we did, and media is stimulating us. So it could be the lights on the phone, it could be the television, it could be any kind of media as a stimulant. But I know Chris talked a little bit about too, and truly kind of, we're not coming after the things that give you comfort, because that's the addiction series, but at the same time, those are things that it is hard. It is hard to lay some of those things down. I've been there personally. And sometimes it does require going to counseling to have somebody help you to kind of work through, what does that even look like? How do I be still? How do I step away from this media and the pressure that comes with it, or sugar, caffeine? Those things are stimulants, and they're things that are very prevalent in our culture, which American culture is the most anxious culture in the world. We know that to be true. And so, we have all of these things, all these stimulants constantly grabbing our attention. We're always trying to do more and be better. And in some ways, that's great. I mean, we have some top scientists in the world, and we have top performers and top athletes. And I mean, there's so much good that can come from trying to be your best, but to be completely stimulated with all of these substances and things, again, is really the fuel of anxiety, right?
And I think that Chris mentioned that about what your focus is on, though, because you have to make sacrifices, I guess, and I think that's something that our culture doesn't really accept, is that we are limited as human beings. I mean, look at us. We're trying to find artificial intelligence and brain mesh that we can, put the internet directly in our, as if Satan's leading the whole world astray. Speak to that. But we're trying to be superhuman. And what God's asking of us is to be humble and to be like little children. And that's it. That's a really hard balance. And it's so easy to slip off into chasing the wrong things, finding comfort in the wrong things. I am so guilty of it. Like, I teach people this, and I'm still guilty of thinking that I'm relaxing if I sit on the couch and check out something. And that's not relaxing. It's actually still stimulating the brain. It's still releasing dopamine. It's the exact opposite of really being still.
The growth in sleep disorders alone in the last year, but really in the last 10 years, is exponential. And we know that a lack of sleep, which is a part of self-care, leads to significant levels of anxiety. If you have anxiety already, you'll be more anxious if you don't get enough sleep on a regular basis. If you don't have anxiety, you will have anxiety soon if you don't get enough sleep. But then the things that we sometimes do before sleep, which is an area we often tackle with treatment for anxiety, are very anxiety inducing.
Yes.
We're talking to people, we're addressing things, we're looking up things that are not helping us. We were talking earlier about Google always leads to death. It always leads there. If you're dealing with a health issue right now, don't Google it. It leads to death every time.
Yes. Google, WebMD, you're, by the time you self-diagnose, yes, you're dying, no matter what it is. So, one of the things.
Something called health anxiety. I mean, there is an actual, health anxiety where, sometimes it's related to a legitimate health concern. And sometimes it's began that way and turned into a concern for a lot of things that are just normal, or that rest or better food or something would take care of. Stomach problems and anxiety go together. Very frequently, headaches and anxiety go together. So, they can kind of become another way of just cycling through looking for worst case scenario, when really some rest
might go a long way.
What helped me a lot was just self-awareness. So, and being brutally honest with myself, things like FOMO, fear of missing out, being one of those kind of people where I was just afraid that, if I wasn't into everything, I was missing out in some way, or, the affirmation junkie, performing for others to get that affirmation back. So I have a lot of mantras I practice in my head just to steer away from those things, just because they cause me more anger than anxiety, but certainly self-awareness has to play into this idea of anxiety and stuff too, and being honest with yourself. Would you say that? Or
absolutely,
very much so.
I mean, a minute ago you were talking about noticing what's happening in your body, and I think when we're still and we meditate or pray, as Chris said during his sermon, when we're still, sometimes we'll start to pay attention to those physical symptoms of anxiety and what's happening inside of us. And the body won't lie to you. It will let you know what's happening. It won't let you go to sleep if you're really anxious. It won't let you shut off your brain if you're really anxious. Your heart will be racing. Your skin will get hot. Something will happen in your body to tell you, this thing that I'm doing is not self-care. It's not rest, not good for me.
But more often than, instead of listening to that, we live in a, well, it's probably always been that way. I was gonna say we live in a time. It's probably always been that way in some way or another. We find some way of self-medicating those uncomfortable feelings so that we don't experience them. But in the process, we are making them worse in the long run. And so it does take an ability to tolerate a certain amount of uncomfortableness. And that's where a lot of times counseling really can help, because we can just teach. Sometimes it's just, really focusing on some deep breathing that can make a big difference. It can bring your cortisol level down. Something you can do it anytime, anywhere. But it takes that little bit of awareness to what is going on with me,
right?
To be able to know that you need to do that. Or shrugging your shoulders up really tight and then letting them go with a deep breath, and you go, oh gosh, yeah, that feels better. I was carrying a lot of tension. But if we're not having that self-awareness, then we just keep plugging along and don't address the things in a way that is really helpful long term.
I like what Chris said. He was talking about, when to know if this is clinical, and he didn't go into the treatment area of it. And I would say I'm under the impression that everybody should go to counseling at some point in their life. A good Christian counselor who is going to bring in that spiritual focus, but also some of those clinical things. It's just never unwise to have a third party who's not a part of your stuff, because we've all kind of been around that person, especially if you're watching this and you have anxiety, who has said, just calm down.
Right.
Just chill out. Why are you so upset? This is not a big deal. And those are really invalidating statements that hurt the heart of somebody who has anxiety. If you're watching this and you don't have anxiety, but somebody does, those are not helpful statements. But sometimes if there's somebody in your life who is saying that, I think if I could just speak for them and say, what they're saying is, I want to help and I don't know how. Right. I'm overwhelmed by what's going on with you, and I feel like you want me to fix it and I can't. Mm-hmm. And so really if those statements are happening from the people around you, it's okay to bring somebody else into that and say, mm-hmm. I think I need some extra help, not to figure it all out and have my 62 ducks in a row better, but rather, how do I deal with what's happening inside of my body and mind so that I can be, if you're a Christ follower, so I can be on purpose about what God does have for me, because not every good thing is a God thing. I've heard that a million times.
Very true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And and I love that, because again, sometimes we're not good at being self-aware or being honest with ourselves, and we need that outside person, that counselor, if we're willing to listen, to kind of help us discover some of those things, those areas that we might struggle with. I do want to open up something. I hope we can unpack it. I know, we try not to take too much time. We know people, only tune in for so long, but one of the rising categories in this area of anxiety, and I know you guys both know what it is, are young teenage, probably girls and boys. I see it, I hear it more as young teenage girls, but I also know that young teenage boys are dealing with it as well. That's the rising category. I mean, it's through the roof, just being multiplied and multiplied. Some of which, goes back to this stuff, but and I know because I know many of you, not just you guys, but other counselors, there's very little room for these kids who need help, or parents feel like they need help. What can the parents do? I sometimes wonder, can the parent do more? Does it always have to be a counselor? Is there something that we maybe could bring light to for parents to help their kids? It might be too big a subject, but I think it's such a big deal for us to try to cover, because I'm sure there's parents watching us as well as some kids, but I think it'd be really helpful for parents to understand how to take care of their kids in this.
Bob, I'm really glad that you went there. I feel like Laura and I are happy we could talk for hours, yes, about this very issue. I specialized in teens back in Missouri, and I do a little bit of teen work now still. And I think it's a generation of parents that are parenting with all this technology, and the technology is a beautiful and wonderful thing. There's so many good things that have happened through it. So not to diss technology, but a lot of parents are raising kids, and I have kids, we had Nokia cell phones when I was younger. I mean, we are raising kids in this digital age, and we don't know what to do. We don't know how to do all of this. And so we just kind of are like running and trying to keep up. And I would say one of the things that is very helpful to do with kids, without any judgment, because I'm a counselor, I work with anxiety, and I deal with this too. We're all in this together. But one of the things is set boundaries. Say no. It's not popular to say no. Your kids won't like it when you say no. But saying no, kids need limits and they need structure as much now as they did 200 years ago. They need to know what's happening next, especially when they're young. Brains don't fully develop until 28, 30 is what the current research is showing. And so, we need structure in our environments. We need to know what's happening. And we need for parents to say, no, we're not going to do 16 activities every week. We're actually we're going to do some things. We're not going to stay holed up and, hunker down. We're going to do some things, but we're not going to do everything. And really helping kids to start to set. I had a proud mom moment with my oldest. He's 8. And this is a struggle of mine, Bob. I'll be honest. I struggle. I've always want to do it all. I just want to help everybody and do it all. And I can't. And the reality is that other people have to step forward and help when you don't do everything. And so I've had to work on that in my own life. And my sweet, wise little 8-year-old, last semester, we were doing more activities because during COVID, we didn't get to do some things. And I was like, I want my kids to get to do some fun things. And so we had him in a sport, and then he wanted to play another sport because his friends were, and he was in music lessons, and we were doing all the things, and we were running around, and we were trying to find time for meals together. And it was overwhelming. I was feeling the stress around it. And I was sitting and having breakfast with my son one day, and he said, Mommy, I'm tired. I don't want to go to whatever the next activity was.
Mhm.
And I wanted to say, well, honey, I know, but we committed and this is what we're doing. And I said, well, let's talk about that, honey, because if your body is telling you you're tired, is it just today? Or are there some things that we need to cut back on? And we sat and had the sweetest conversation about what maybe his commitments were, school and, tidying his room when he needs to, and those kinds of family commitments. But also the activities that he had committed to. And he decided to set one of his activities aside. And it was actually the activity that I thought was the most helpful. But he decided on his own, Mom, when I'm done with this month of this, I'm going to set that aside and really focus on these other activities for a time. And I thought, gosh, my 8-year-old was teaching me limits and just knowing when to say, okay. And so I think that's something that we can do as parents, is have those real conversations with our kids of, you can't do everything. You're not a superhuman. And so what does committing to this, but not committing to everything look like?
Yeah. I want to tell some parents that, your child is not going to be a multi-sport superstar. LeBron James isn't. He sticks to basketball. That's his sport. He's not playing football, and he's not playing baseball, and he's not playing soccer, and yet a lot of times we drag kids to every one of those stinking sports thinking they're going to be a multi-sport superstar. They're not.
Yeah. And some of them aren't going to be in any sports at all.
At all. Yeah. I had a nephew who played multi-sports, and just when he got out of high school, he was just done. He just didn't want to do it anymore. So, yeah.
The kids get burnt out. A lot of times we see that, they get so much pressure so early in these things that they get burnt out, and then they feel, it's part of the anxiety too. They feel this expectation that I'm supposed to be good at all of these things.
Right.
And then social media obviously adds to that. And parents, with good intention, add to that. And so it's really, I think you have to be prayerful about that. You have to know your kid. Some kids really thrive on a lot of different things, and that's okay, but some just don't. When my son was little, we used to, sign him up for this or that, and then realize, well, he's actually kind of an introvert, and it really saps me. So to be an introvert with an extrovert for a mom, later on I thought, oh, thank goodness there's some good therapists, because I probably messed him up when he was little. I don't know. You really have to know your kid and help them learn how to put down those limits. I love that you had that conversation with him at age.
Pray for my kids, y'all, because their mom is a therapist.
Right.
I know. They are, but and speaking to what you said about God created you, whoever's watching, God created you to be who you are, to be good at the things that you're good at, and to not be good at the things that you are not good at. And that's okay. None of us can be good at everything.
We're supposed to be a body, all working together.
Yes, all working together, not one part of the body trying to be the entire body. And your kids, God created them to be who they are. And so I think one of the sweetest things we can do as parents is discover who your kid is and let them be who they are and who God called them to be, separate from you, but also setting limits around. I've had families, and you probably have too, Laura, where I'm trying to figure out a time for family counseling for them, and they don't have a time. They're like, we're too busy. And I think and I've said before to families, so you're telling me your whole family is falling apart. Everything is falling apart. Things are in crisis. You're here paying me, talking to me about this, but you cannot find a time anywhere in your schedule to prioritize working through this. We don't have time for counseling. We don't have time for church. We don't have time to get in community with other believers and really do life together because we're too busy. And that's just, I don't think that's what God called us to.
No, definitely.
It's just not.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you have permission to eliminate things out of your schedule if you want.
Amen.
Yeah. How about it? So some of us need to hear that. Some of us need to be told that.
You have permission. Yeah. You have permission to be a parent, which, I hate for that to ever sound condescending, and I worry sometimes that it does. Yeah, but I just meet so many parents who, well, he's so unhappy if I take away the Xbox. Well, yeah, because he's addicted to it. So just, I feel like sometimes parents need to be encouraged to know that they're allowed to make the rules, and it's okay for your child to be unhappy sometimes, because too much entertainment isn't really happiness anyway.
Yeah.
And I think if parents can create the time to be really present with their kid, that's what kids really need. Is just to know that somebody's really here with me, that I really have someone I can talk to that really cares about my heart, that really is trying to figure out who I am and how to help me grow into who I'm designed to be. And that takes time, and we have to make it. We just have to.
And it's okay as parents to shift course. It's okay to be going in one direction and realize this is not working for our family. This is a mess. And then change what you're doing. The brain is very malleable. If your kid is struggling with some things, it's not all your fault. You didn't mess it all up. It's probably your parents' fault. Not really. It's somebody else's fault, right? It's always somebody else's fault. But
it all started in Genesis.
We can blame something. There's something out there to blame. Oh, there's something out there to blame.
No, there are no perfect families. It's okay to realize, oh, there's some things that we would like to change and do differently, and sit down and have a vulnerable, real, humble conversation with your kids and say, Mom and Dad thought this would be a good idea. We decided it wouldn't. Now we're changing what we're doing. It's okay to have that conversation at 6. It's okay to have it at 16. Your kids don't have to be happy about it. That's why you're the parent and they're the kid. And you can have that conversation with empathy. It doesn't have to be, I'm the parent, you're the kid. Shut up. I don't want to talk to you. Yes. It can be, hey, this is hard and I'm here and I love you, but I think this is what God's calling our family to, whatever that thing is. And then really speaking to teenagers too. I've worked with a lot of teenagers, and you don't have to build your platform. You don't have to be the next Instagram model. You don't have to be a YouTube star.
A lot of pressure on that.
Yes. And you're probably not going to be. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be an amazing person who makes a huge impact on the world, but you don't have to be that person. In fact, I would say, look around. A lot of those people have a lot of mental health issues, probably because they were super focused on this one thing, and then they attained it and realized it doesn't bring joy. That's not the only thing. And so,
and there's a constant pressure to try to keep it up, when you're in that kind of position that causes so
much pressure.
Wow. So if parents had one thing they could do for their kids, would you say it's setting those boundaries? Is it saying no to some things? Again, my boys are in college now, so I'm starting to see some of the reward, but there were plenty of things that we said no to. And I had to say no and just say, hey, you're going to appreciate this later. And the good news is they're showing me that they appreciate it later. And the stories are good and stuff. It was, they didn't like it at the time, but they did. And then if I can indulge with just one quick story, there was a boy years ago who, it was that goth time when, kids dressed all black and trench coats and, everything. And he was that kid at church, and he would stay by himself. And you have to know me, I gravitate towards kids like that. And so I'd always talk to him and stuff like that. Well, a year goes by, I hadn't seen him. He hadn't been at church. And then all of a sudden one day he's at church and he's a totally different kid. I mean, he looks like, the goth stuff is gone and he just looks normal. And I said, hey, you look so different. What's going on? Well, how are you doing? He says, well, my parents, his parents were divorced. And so he was juggling all that stuff. But he says, my parents have been going through some counseling and they put boundaries in my life. And I love it. And I said, well, what do you love about it? He says, I feel like they love me now. I feel like they really care about me. And it's changed everything for me. And so I just want to encourage parents with that story that, they may not like it out of the gate, but that in fact, kids love, or they feel loved by our boundaries sometimes, because there's safety, there's security, there's confidence that comes from that says, my mom and dad have my back and they're there for me. Stuff like that. So I just love that story, and I love that illustration, it because it was real. I like real stories. So.
Bob, look at our good Father who gave us the word with all the boundaries in it, knowing that the devil prowls around like a roaring lion and that we would need boundaries to stay safe.
Isn't that beautiful?
You know, that's exactly what that is.
Yeah.
The boundaries are to keep us safe, not to punish us.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, this has been a great conversation, and I love that we were able to talk so much about anxiety, self-image, self-awareness, knowing who we are, knowing who God is, how he created us to be, and then, closing with this idea of his amazing love for us that includes boundaries, that there is a way to live that includes boundaries that is full life, something we talk about at LifePoint all the time. This idea of full life comes when we live within those guardrails that God gave us. He's not what is that, cosmic killjoy. In fact, he desires that we would live all the fullness of life within these boundaries that he's placed for us. And how cool when we do that. And in the case of anxiety, it's setting those priorities in such a way that we can say no to certain things. And then, as we just finished talking about with parents, how do we do that as parents, and helping our kids say no to certain things and actually parent them along the way as we do that. And then I'm just going to throw it in one more time, because I'm with you, Laura. I mean, there's so much that, our awareness, we're better at awareness of what's going on around the world than we are in our own awareness of ourselves. And I think that brings on a lot of this anxiety thing for us too. So could I have one of you guys pray for us to close? I haven't done that in any of these Zoom sessions, but today just feels like a good one to just pray us out on, because this is a big topic.
Why don't we both pray? Yeah, I love it. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
We're gonna pray.
We will. Lord, thank you so much that we have this space and this time to come before you and to give opportunity for others to, just hear us talk a little bit more about anxiety, and hopefully something resonates with people. And Lord, we trust that you'll just take whatever we babbled out and that you'll bring good from it, because that's what you do. I thank you, Lord, for the boundaries that you've put around us in life. And I thank you personally for the lessons you've taught me, that going outside of those boundaries just really does create more pain and anxiety, and that they're really there for my good. I thank you, Lord, that you love us enough to give us boundaries and a way to live, and a way to love, and a way to be still and quiet, so that we can receive your love. And that in receiving your love, we can trust you. And then we know that we don't have to worry about all the things going wrong, because you've designed us for eternity. And we're all just a work in progress. And Lord, for the people out there who are really suffering, I just pray that you give them a special, unique sense of your presence, a special, unique word for their own hearts that they can use to go back and remember. Know that they're seen and they're heard and they're loved, and that you do care about the worries of their heart. And Lord, that you would encourage them or enable them to cast those cares onto you, Lord, so that you could care for them. I pray that in Jesus' name.
God, I just come to you and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with Laura and Bob and just to talk about this issue that is really close to all of our hearts, Lord. And I know that there are people watching this or listening to this, or even not watching or listening to this, that are just struggling, Lord. They're struggling with anxiety. They feel like it's impossible to lay it down at your feet. And sometimes people feel like a failure because they haven't been able to, and they've tried and they thought they got it and they didn't get it. And God, I just pray away any shame that could get internalized in the heart of the people watching this. God, I just pray that they do not hear that they have failed, that they're doing it wrong, that they don't have it figured out, Lord, but rather that they hear your grace and mercy is new every day. We need it every day, God. And I just pray that they feel inspired to tackle this thing called anxiety, knowing that there are tools that they can care for themselves and set different boundaries and bring in professionals, doctors, counselors who can help them with this, Lord.
Mhm.
God, sometimes anxiety is a little thing. It's little things that have built up over time. And God, we know that sometimes it is big things. It is huge, traumatic, horrible things that have happened to people. And it feels so insurmountable. And God, we know it is not insurmountable with you. We know that with you, we can do this. We can tackle these things and we can take the next step forward. And when anxiety creeps in, we can pay attention, Lord, to what's happening in our hearts and just be still with you. And I just pray that the people that have listened to this today and the people that haven't, Lord, that they come closer to you through it. In your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Man, I love this time. I don't want it to end, but that's always the case when I'm hanging out with you guys. I mean, I think we could talk all night, but this topic
And
is
we have.
yeah. This topic is so big, so good. I love what you prayed there, Laura, and that, you know, not our babble, but that God would somehow allow the Holy Spirit to speak to our hearts. And again, I want to remind people we don't at all take anxiety lightly. We know that some suffer at different levels with this. This isn't a simple pray away sort of thing or a simple verse that's going to make us feel better in some cases, but it's an ongoing work and allowing God to do that. And yet sometimes it starts as simply as being still and letting us hear God's voice. So guys, you're so great. And I love spending this time with you. Oh, I'm the life groups guy. I'd be absolutely remiss if I didn't mention that, you know, part of, you know, being healthy is being in community with others where you can share those burdens, or maybe somebody can help carry some of those things that are turning into anxiety for you. And we do that in community when we're willing to open up, be vulnerable, and we're just simply better together when we do that. So I want to always encourage people to be in community. If you're not in community, be in community. We'd love to help you get connected. The next Connect event is September 2nd at 6:30. So yeah, that's an opportunity to get in a community if you're not there. But thank you again, guys. I love you guys so much. And this was good. So
Right.
yeah,
Thanks, Papa.
thank you.
Love you back. Yes.
All right. Love you guys.